Your soil isn't dead, it's sleeping, and what I'm about to show you will wake it up faster than you ever thought possible. Most gardeners spend hundreds of dollars on fertilizers and amendments, never realizing that the real magic happens in the invisible world beneath their feet, where billions of microorganisms and earthworms are waiting to transform your garden into the most productive space you've ever seen. What I poured into my raised beds last spring changed everything, and within 2 days the soil went from compacted and lifeless to dark, crumbly, and teeming with activity. If this sounds like something your garden needs, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because I'm sharing techniques that actually work in real American backyards. Hey there, it's great to have you here. And if you find value in what I'm sharing today, a quick like really helps more gardeners discover these methods. Let me take you back to early April when I was standing in my garden, frustrated beyond belief. The soil in my vegetable beds had become hard as concrete over the winter. After months of freeze and thaw cycles in Zone 6, the ground was depleted and compacted. I'd been adding compost each season, but plants never truly thrived. Tomatoes were spindly, peppers took forever to set fruit, and lettuce bolted too quickly. The problem wasn't just nutrients, it was the living ecosystem my soil was lacking. That's when I discovered soil biology. Every handful of thriving garden soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on the planet. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and earthworms work together, breaking down organic matter, making nutrients available to plants, improving soil structure, and suppressing diseases. Without them, you're growing in dirt, not soil, and there's a massive difference. The solution was surprisingly simple. I made actively aerated compost tea. When you brew this properly, you extract and multiply beneficial microorganisms from finished compost. The aeration keeps oxygen high, favoring good aerobic bacteria and fungi while preventing harmful anaerobic species. You end up with a concentrated liquid teeming with billions of beneficial microbes. Here's what I did. I filled a 5-gallon bucket with dechlorinated water. Chlorine kills microbes, so I let tap water sit 24 hours or used rainwater. Then I added 2 cups of high-quality finished compost, the dark, earthy-smelling material that's completely decomposed. I also added a tablespoon of unsulfured molasses as food for the bacteria, providing sugars that make them multiply rapidly. Next, I set up an aquarium air pump with an air stone at the bottom. This ran continuously for 30 hours, keeping oxygen levels high. The tea bubbled and frothed as microbes multiplied. After 30 hours, it smelled sweet and earthy, like a forest floor after rain. If it smells sulfurous, it went anaerobic and needs dumping. But mine was perfect. I diluted the tea 1 part to 10 parts water, then poured it directly onto soil around my plants, saturating root zones thoroughly. I also sprayed leaves to introduce beneficial microbes to leaf surfaces, where they outcompete harmful pathogens. I treated every bed, using 15 gallons of diluted tea across 400 square feet. Within 48 hours, I noticed changes. The crusty soil surface softened. My finger pushed into ground that had been like asphalt. But the most dramatic sign was earthworms. Lifting the mulch revealed dozens where there had been 1 or 2 before. The sudden influx of microbial activity brought them to surface layers. Earthworms are nature's plows. They create channels improving drainage and aeration. Their castings contain 5 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphorus, and 11 times more potassium than surrounding soil, plus growth hormones and enzymes stimulating plant growth. Seeing their population explode confirmed I was on the right track. Over the next 2 weeks, the transformation continued in ways I hadn't anticipated. My tomato plants, which had been pale and struggling, suddenly put on a growth spurt. Leaves darkened to rich green, and new flower clusters formed at a rate I'd never seen. Peppers that had been dormant started pushing out new growth, and within a month they were loaded with fruit. But here's what really amazed me. I stopped fertilizing completely. The microbial community I'd established was doing all the work, breaking down organic matter and making nutrients available in forms plants could actually use. Now let me share something that might surprise you. Scientists have discovered that plants actually recruit specific microbes to their root zones by releasing sugars through their roots. Different plants attract different microbial communities based on their needs. When you introduce diverse beneficial microbes through compost tea, you're giving plants more options, like stocking a pantry with ingredients instead of forcing them to make do with whatever's there. This is why compost tea works so much better than synthetic fertilizers. You're feeding the entire soil ecosystem that feeds the plants. The best part is this keeps working long after the initial application. Microbes establish colonies, reproduce, and continue their beneficial activities as long as they have food and moisture. I applied compost tea again about 6 weeks later, then once more in midsummer, and results compounded with each application. By August, my soil was unrecognizable. It was dark, loose, and every shovelful revealed earthworms. Let me address a common mistake. Some gardeners brew tea for 3 or 4 days, or add too much molasses, thinking it will boost microbial activity. What actually happens is the population explodes so fast they consume all oxygen, and the brew goes anaerobic. Anaerobic conditions favor harmful bacteria that can damage plants. Stick to 24 to 36 hours brewing time, use molasses sparingly, and ensure your air pump keeps water well oxygenated. Another frequent question: can you use compost tea on indoor plants or containers? Absolutely. Container plants benefit tremendously because their soil ecosystem is more limited. I use it on potted herbs, houseplants, and patio vegetables. Just remember to use it fresh. Compost tea loses effectiveness within hours after turning off the air pump, so plan to use it the same day. Here's something that might change how you think about watering. Beneficial microbes need oxygen just like plants do. Overwatering creates anaerobic conditions that kill good microbes and favor disease organisms. After focusing on soil biology, I changed my watering to deep but less frequent, allowing the top few inches to dry between waterings. This keeps oxygen levels high and encourages deeper root growth. My plants became more drought-tolerant because their root systems were healthier. The earthworm population has remained high ever since that first application. I now see them whenever I work the soil, and I've stopped tilling because I don't want to disrupt their tunnels and fungal networks. Instead, I practice no-till gardening, adding compost and mulch to the surface and letting worms and microbes incorporate it naturally. This preserves soil structure and keeps microbial communities intact. What would you say is the biggest challenge with your garden soil right now? Is it compaction, lack of nutrients, or plants that never seem to thrive? Drop your answer in the comments because I'd love to hear what you're dealing with. Now I want to talk about something most gardeners overlook: the role of fungal networks in soil health. When we think about soil life, we picture bacteria and earthworms, but fungi are equally important. Mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relationships with plant roots, extending thread-like hyphae far beyond where roots can reach. These fungal networks stretch for miles, connecting different plants and allowing them to share nutrients and chemical signals. When one plant is under pest attack, it can warn neighbors through these fungal highways, and those plants ramp up their defense mechanisms before the pest arrives. Compost tea contains beneficial fungi along with bacteria, but you can also add mycorrhizal inoculants when planting. I started dusting tomato and squash roots with mycorrhizal powder before transplanting, and the difference was remarkable. Plants established faster, showed less transplant shock, and developed robust root systems. Mycorrhizal fungi increase the plant's ability to absorb water and nutrients by up to 10 times. In exchange, plants share sugars from photosynthesis. It's a perfect partnership evolving for hundreds of millions of years. Here's a practical tip that saved my garden during a hot July. Mulch is essential for maintaining microbial life because it moderates soil temperature, retains moisture, and provides constant food as it breaks down. I use wood chips, straw, or shredded leaves, keeping a layer 3 to 4 inches thick. This creates a protective blanket, keeping soil cooler in summer and warmer in winter, allowing microbes to remain active longer. Beds with good mulch coverage had far more earthworm activity than exposed soil. Something I discovered by accident: coffee grounds are incredible for feeding soil microbes. I started collecting used grounds from a local cafe, bringing home buckets weekly. Coffee grounds are nitrogen-rich, slightly acidic, and microbes love them. I spread them thinly over beds and work them into the top inch, or add them to compost. Within days, earthworm activity increased wherever I'd applied coffee grounds. Just don't pile them thick because they can form a water-resistant mat. Let me bust a myth. Many gardeners remove all plant debris at season's end to prevent disease, but this works against soil health. In nature, nothing gets removed. Dead leaves, stems, and roots break down in place, feeding the soil ecosystem and creating humus. Unless plants had serious disease like blight, I leave debris in place, chopping it up so it breaks down faster. This feeds overwintering microbes, and by spring, it's mostly decomposed. Crop rotation isn't just about preventing pests. It's about managing soil microbial communities. Different plant families attract different microbes. When you rotate crops each season, you diversify the soil microbiome, making the ecosystem more resilient. I follow a simple 4-year rotation: nightshades, then legumes, then brassicas, then root vegetables. Each group leaves behind different microbial communities that benefit the next crop. Compost tea works beautifully as a foliar spray too. Spraying leaves introduces beneficial bacteria and fungi that colonize leaf surfaces, crowding out pathogens. I do this early in the season on plants prone to fungal issues like tomatoes, cucumbers, and squash. Since starting this practice, I've seen far less powdery mildew and leaf spot. Spray early morning so leaves dry before evening. Have you ever tried using compost tea or other microbial inoculants in your garden? And if so, what results did you notice? Now I save something really powerful for last. A technique that combines everything into one approach that transformed not just my soil, but my entire philosophy about gardening. I call it building a living soil system, based on mimicking natural ecosystems where soil continually improves without human intervention. The idea is simple. Feed the soil, not the plants, and let the microbial community handle the rest. Here's how I implemented this. Instead of buying fertilizer bags each spring, I started investing in bulk organic matter. I bring in a truckload of finished compost each fall and spread it 2 inches thick over all beds. I don't till it in. I simply lay it on the surface and let earthworms and microbes incorporate it naturally over winter. By spring, most has been pulled down into the soil, leaving behind a dark, crumbly layer alive with beneficial organisms. This costs less than what I spent on fertilizers, and results are incomparably better. I also started making my own compost in a 3-bin system. The first bin gets fresh materials, kitchen scraps, garden waste, shredded cardboard, grass clippings, and leaves. When full, I turn it into the second bin where it actively decomposes. Then it moves to the third bin for final curing. This gives me continuous supply of finished compost, teeming with exactly the microorganisms my garden needs, already adapted to my local conditions. One thing that accelerated my compost production was adding red wiggler worms to my bins. These composting worms process organic matter incredibly fast, and their castings are even richer than regular compost. A pound of red wigglers can process about half a pound of food scraps daily. I started with 2 pounds and now have several pounds distributed across bins. When I mix worm castings into potting soil for starting seeds, germination rates improve and seedlings grow more vigorously than any commercial mix I've used. Here's a surprising discovery about cover crops. I used to leave beds bare after harvesting, but now I immediately plant cover crops like crimson clover, winter rye, or hairy vetch. These plants keep living roots in soil, which is crucial because roots constantly exude sugars feeding soil microbes. When microbial populations stay active through fall and winter, soil structure continues improving. In early spring, I chop down cover crops and leave them as mulch. They add organic matter and nitrogen back into soil. The economics deserve mention. My first year focusing on soil biology, I spent about $60 on an air pump and supplies for compost tea, plus another $100 on bulk compost. Since then, fertilizer costs dropped to almost nothing. I haven't bought synthetic fertilizers in 3 years. Meanwhile, harvests increased significantly. Last summer, I grew more tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and squash than my family could eat, and we gave away produce weekly. Beyond practical benefits, there's something deeply satisfying about working with natural systems. When I dig into soil and see it crawling with life, when I watch earthworms tunneling through beds, when I smell that rich, earthy scent, I feel connected to something bigger than just growing vegetables. This is how plants have thrived for millions of years before humans came along with bottles and bags. We're simply remembering what was always there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be. Start with one thing. Make a batch of compost tea and apply it. Watch what happens over the next few weeks. Notice the earthworms, observe how plants respond, feel the soil texture change. Once you see results, you'll naturally want to do more. Each step builds on the last, and within a season or two, you'll have soil that sustains itself. So, what's the one thing you're going to try first? Brewing compost tea, adding mulch, starting a worm bin, or planting cover crops? Share it in the comments so we can learn from each other's experiences. If this video opened your eyes to a new way of thinking about your garden, consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next one where we keep growing together.